Serious teachers of Reddit, what is the most disturbing thing your student has ever done? A kid tried to hold the classroom hostage by pulling a box cutter. Immediately started making crazy demands. Before security could even arrive, a big kid pushed him down, grabbed the box cutter right out of his hands and said quit being an asshole, then sat right back down for the lesson to continue. Middle school English teacher. I had a student pull a tooth out of his own head to get out of silent reading. It was a baby tooth, thank God, but according to mom it was not loose. He just sat at his desk and grabbed it and yanked it back and forth and popped it out and came up to the desk bleeding all over himself and said he wasn't able to read anymore, so could he just put his head down. He was sent to the nurse and mom was horrified. Damn, that book must have really sucked. That is the thing, it was his choice. He could literally read anything he wanted. Comics, sports magazines, shitty Wattpad fanfiction. Anything he wants and he still won't do it. I had a girl who couldn't be in the classroom and had to be on a one with me at all times. But she couldn't be in the classroom because she was extremely violent and deliberately stabbed another child in the eye with a colored pencil, then laughed about it. The other child had to be hospitalized. When we asked her why she did it, she started laughing again and said because I wanted to. She would also randomly attack kids on the playground and in the halls. When they put her on a one with me and she couldn't do that anymore, she started attacking me on a daily basis. She was 4. I had a 5th grade student pick up 2 brick-sized rocks and try and stone another kid to death. I was a teaching assistant for an EBD school. Had one of the students try to stab me in the throat with a knife repeatedly during class. No one gave a shit, so I quit and moved on. Recently had one of my students tell a pregnant teacher that he wanted to punch her in the stomach. Another student said, "You can't do that. She's pregnant." The first student then said, "That's the point. These are 5th graders." This is also in a school that rarely has behavior problems, so this was quite a shock. Something similar happened to me when I was pregnant with my first. A student told me he was going to make me lose the baby. It's the only time I've really ever flipped out on a student in my 7 years of teaching. That student had some serious issues, though, and by the end of the school year I was the only teacher he would talk to about the shit that went on his life, bouncing from foster home to foster home, abuse, etc. He left a letter on my desk at the end of the year saying that my unborn child was incredibly lucky to have me as a mom. I ugly cried at my desk when I read it. I was a supervisor for a special program that involved about 20 students that were expelled from other schools. Most of them were known gang members. The program had a strict no bandana policy. One day kid 1, M16, stole kid 2's, M17, cigarettes while kid 2 was in an office session about his homework. We found out later that kid 1 thought it was hilarious and was laughing about it. Kid 2 goes for his smokes during break and can't find them. He proceeds to flip out and start screaming about how he's going to fuck someone up. No one admitted it. We de-escalated the situation and later took him to the store to buy a new pack for him. A few days go by and kid 1 gets ratted out by another student who was in the same gang as kid 2. We didn't know any of this was going on at the time. One afternoon during a group session, we would have them sit in a circle during some lessons, instead of at desks. Out of nowhere these 2 boys jump up and yell "Yo kid 1" as they literally run at him and proceed to beat him up right in front of everyone until the staff broke it up. All 3 got expelled after that and I have no idea what happened to them, although I can imagine some scenarios based on how committed they were to gang life. I had a 5th grader who I swore was sociopathic. His father had deported the boy's mother because he wanted a new wife, if that gives some context to the living situation. The boy would say very aggressive sexual things, moon students on the bus, etc. But the predatory behavior was the worst. He'd wait as students left the room so he could be next to last, turn off the light and backhand the last kid in line, often his own cousin who was his most common victim. I had to keep an eye on him constantly. He'd also steal electronics and things from his friends, or force his cousin to do so in case they were caught. P.S. Yes, CPS was involved. This was almost a decade ago, so I'm not sure what happened to him. I taught 3rd graders for a year, so the kids were around 9 years old. It was a couple of days before summer holidays and I asked the kids what they were going to do during summer. I got to this one girl and asked her what she was going to do and she happily announced she was going to Germany with her sister and parents. I asked her what she was going to do in Germany and she said she was going to ask people if they have €1. I was like what, and she proceeded to sit down on the floor with a really sad look on her face, stuck her hand out to me and said, "See like this. Please miss, do you have just €1? I'm hungry." She didn't really see anything wrong with this. I'm pretty sure she didn't really understand what she was doing. I was quite alarmed by this, so I informed the other school staff. It turned out that even though they weren't actually poor, her parents were regularly taking their 2 daughters to Germany over summer where they would make them beg for money in the streets. I heard the girl and her sister got pulled out of school shortly after that, but I don't know what happened after since I don't work there anymore. Was teaching 7th grade in what we call in Germany gymnasium, something like high school, and it was the 2nd week of the year. I noticed some kind of stress in him. And then at one point he erupted. Threw his pencil case against the blackboard, yelled, "Everything is shit. Everything." Stood up, climbed on the desk, pulled out his penis, and peed while crying. The whole class including me was just shocked. I would have liked to prevent this situation, but it just escalated so quickly, and when it was happening it was so surreal I was paralyzed. After what felt like 100 years I just grabbed him, threw him over my shoulder and walked out of the classroom. Held him by his hand while shouting into the classroom that they should stay in the classroom while I'm away and only leave it for the next class. I went to call his parents. He got picked up and never came back to this school. I don't know what happened to him. More like what they said. I worked on a placement in a primary school back when I was in college, gaining experience for free, and one of the pupils asked me for colored paper out of this tray. One of the rules of the class was that they could only use plain paper and had to use both sides of it before they might be able to get another piece. So after I said she wouldn't be allowed to, she gave me a angry look and told me to wait around after the school was out so she could get her dad to beat me up. Shame, because she was a nice girl. Did her dad beat you up? I don't know. I didn't see her dad, her mum picked her up. I used to teach at an alternative high school. So a lot of my students were kids on probation, kids from areas with a lot of gang violence. Many of them had issues related to the fact that they were born drug addicted. That kind of thing. I had a student who I had worked hard with to build a good rapport. One Friday, he looked me in the eyes and told me, completely calmly, that I shouldn't come to work on Monday. He kept telling me that he didn't want me to be there Monday. When I finally pressed him for why I should not come to work Monday, he told me that he was going to blow this shit up. I said, "You know I need to report this, right?" He told me to do what I had to do. He was arrested right out of my classroom and I had to be interviewed by the police. It was honestly really traumatic. I ended up calling out Monday, even though I knew nothing was going to happen because my anxiety went through the roof. I called out a lot after that and found a new job shortly after. But I still have a great deal of compassion for that student. I think about him often. I hope he's okay. Today a 6-year-old boy in my class threatened to kill me just because I took his toy car out of his hand after asking him multiple times to put it away. He also trashed my desk looking for it, but luckily it was in my pocket. Kid cranking his shaft in the middle of a state test that is a graduation requirement. Kid was nervous. Geez, let a man relax. He wants that post-nut clarity to carry him through. I used to teach a PE class to 3-5-year-olds. I had this one kid who used to come with his friend from kinda. His friend's mother apologized to me numerous times and said she never would have offered to bring him if she knew what he was like. More than once I had to evacuate the rest of the kids from the gym because this 3-year-old would be running around the gym screaming "Foo, I can see you UNT" at the top of his lungs, while trying to punch, kick or headbutt other kids. You never knew what would set him off. If you asked him to kick a ball, he was equally likely to kick another student or the ball. One time he went so violent that I couldn't get him away from the other kids and ended up wrapping him up in the firm cuddle technique, which they definitely don't teach teachers about anymore. I basically dropped him to his knees with me on my knees behind him, arms wrapped around his arms and his chest. The only part he could move was his head and he kept trying to smash the back of his head into my face. But the worst part was the laughter. He normally had a vague, empty look on his face, but when he was trying to hurt someone he would scream with laughter wearing the biggest shit-eating grin. I only had him for 10 sessions once a week, but holy f**k, I will never forget that kid. Thanks for watching. Hail Hydra.